Hi everybody, my name is Mike Mills, Business Director at Gamma.
And I'm Dave Williams, Group Commercial Director at Gamma.
Now, we're going to talk today about, some might say the driest subject in telecoms, but that's absolutely not the view of some of our partners. It's actually probably one of the most important, and that's regulation. Now, I just want to caveat this with regulation's a highly complex subject and nuanced, and you should definitely take legal advice. This is our opinion rather than absolute regulatory advice. So what does it mean to Gamma to do it properly, Dave, when it comes to international telecoms regulations and how we keep our customers protected?
So I would say, Mike, well, you and I, to be honest, have spent many hours in an evening kicking this around. So it's funny you asked the question. That doing it properly depends on the expectations of your end customer and the risk appetite of the business you're in. Now, for Gamma, those 2 points are really critical. So firstly, our risk appetite is very low. We don't want to take risks as a business. You know, you and I have grown up in the business, and you and I don't want to write bad business on a sort of personal level as much as a business level. Gamma, with its strong UK channel base, with SMB and enterprise customers, the impact of writing bad business outside the UK is not so much the regulatory issues that might arise abroad. It's the UK reputational impact and the loss of service to really critical customers in our core geography.
And actually, we've had some very real examples, I think, just this year where partners have called us and said, look, we've got our Spanish numbers turned off in 48 hours. Can you help? And that's an increasingly common problem, across the industry.
Yeah. So doing it properly comes with a cost. There's levels, of course, of debt that you can go into globally with footprint. And by that, I mean sort of, boots on the ground, resilient SPCs in every geography, number range holdings, interconnects with every, domestic tier one supplier. There's levels above that, which is, trusted interconnects with key suppliers in each geography, a deep understanding of requirements from a call them out, emergency calling, porting, quality of route type level, which is where we are in most of our core geographies, and overlaid, I think, with an appreciation of the consequences, and we're not just talking necessarily telecoms regulation here. We're talking tax. We're talking, compliance outside of just frankly our area of expertise, and so therefore, in order to do things properly, you bring in those competencies. You take advantage of expert knowledge around the world, frankly, as we have been, as you know, and you overlay that with how you want to do business with your customers. So just probably to recap, I would say we're not sort of here with a crib sheet of 250 countries or whatever it is with sort of tick box. We're saying, it's very easy to go out to a geography, establish a partnership, and route some traffic. It's very, very difficult to actually stick your neck on the line reputationally and say, we stand behind this as a service and you can trust us. And that's where I want to be.
Yeah, I think you touched on some really interesting kind of points earlier on. And one of the things that sort of resonates with me is the sort of human cultural element, the sort of each geography and territory is very different culturally to do business in, but also the kind of, we need to put our name to a service, right? And we need to be able to stand behind it. And if you're not confident in your supply chain and you don't have the right relationships, I think that's really, really difficult to try and stand behind. And certainly, I know from experience, we've taken our time in doing that and finding the right partnerships and getting the right advice and putting the right sort of robustness under the hood of what we're trying to do. So, yeah, I think that's really interesting. In terms of the general market, one of the things I see that is quite conflicting in the cloud communications market is you've got all this global regulation around stamping down on nuisance calling and the kind of relatively heavy-handed approach both networks and operators are taking. And then you've got the cloud communications market, which is sort of sat in the middle of this trying to circumnavigate. And I think it's a really challenging landscape for cloud communication providers to operate in when you've got the need for global communication enablement. So you've got, cloud platform A wants to sell to customer in territory B, but in order to do that, you in some instances have to be landed in that territory with a point of presence. What's your perspective on how communication providers can really make the most and do their best in that tough regulatory environment, getting tougher, frankly, by the week, and then a customer need and requirement to provide global services as if it's software. But just, I'd love your insight and thoughts into that, because that's a topic I talk to customers about nearly every day of the week, and it's weighs heavily on their minds. They're getting squeezed as they're trying to grow their business by regional and national regulators.
What we're seeing is that regulators in each geography are getting increasing pressure from their governments. UK is no exception, to reduce the amount of scam and nuisance calls. Because if you take the UK, for example, the banks are now having to pay compensation to what they call authorized push payments, which is basically to say, even if you have authorized a payment on your laptop or whatever on your phone, if you've been scammed, then they have to give money back.
Right.
So that's clearly leading to this industry-wide endeavor, which is to try to reduce fraud and scams. And the current sort of thought process across regulators in the UK is no different, is that in order to reduce scams, you need to try to reduce the amount of spoofing that you have, where people effectively purport to be somebody else, a bank, for example.
Yeah, and so that's presenting a number that, for example, isn't yours but belongs to a bank.
Well, yeah, good question. So spoofing technically is just presenting a number that you own on a device that isn't attached to that number, right? So spoofing is a legitimate way of doing business, and actually lots of our customers legitimately spoof their numbers to from a call center or whatever. But in the context of this, we're talking about maliciously pretending to be someone you're not. Now in the UK, we're blocking calls from abroad, both network and presentation numbers now that are presenting UK numbers to UK customers.
Yeah.
Right. But in other geographies, there's those restrictions are in place, but they're also restricting how many times you're allowed to suballocate phone numbers. So suballocation is basically saying where you get a number stock from the regulator and you allocate. So they're allocated to a network, but and as we know in the UK, it's very common, and Gamma does this lots, to take your number stocks and allocate them on again to a reseller who may themselves actually, as part of their service wrap, allocate them on again to another sub-reseller. And that's common, and that in the UK, I think we're all sort of sitting here thinking, well, that's led to very innovative market. It's not just sort of tier one providers that provide telco services, as you know in your business unit, of course. But what's taking place overseas is the regulators are trying to get closer to understanding the ownership of the phone numbers, which is resulting in restrictions in how far away the regulator was allowed to be to the end user of the service.
Right.
So sub-allocation restrictions. So France, for example, doesn't allow sub-allocation at all. So as of, I'm going to say Jan 23, I think, every provider in France now has to allocate numbers that were directly given to them by the regulator. Yeah.
Yep.
Now you can imagine the chaos of there's something like 600 applications for numbers, right? And of course, there's not that many numbers knocking around. So France actually had to remove the geographic restrictions,
right? So that
it effectively had a sort of nomadic concept, and they're allocating blocks at I think 10,000.
Okay.
But even so, for the sorts of sort of interesting cloud platform provider solutions that you and I understand from your customer base, our partners don't necessarily need 10,000 numbers to enable voice as a communications channel to their overall global service.
Yeah.
So it brings with it complexity.
Okay, and I guess love your take on the things we're doing to help our cloud customers to circumnavigate this. I know we've been doing a lot of work on, first of all, making sure that we're a regulated licensed provider in those territories, and then making sure that we're able to support our partners in doing it the right way to provide a risk-free or lower risk approach to providing, global or pan-European services in that nuanced cloud environment.
Yeah, so start again with the UK. The UK is obviously looking at know your customer checks, weirdly only on businesses. There's no sort of know your customer check on a pay-as-use mobile, sort of interesting sort of slant where the scam journeys operate. We are. Know your customer checks have applied from other geographies for a lot longer.
Yep.
So there's an increased amount of diligence needed in certain territories. Germany, for example, you need to evidence that your business is located in the region of. There's other sort of passport requirements for domestic services. So we will effectively manage those. We have interconnects with as I said earlier, sort of key strategic partners on a strong, relationship basis. And actually a lot of this is critical, because if something goes wrong, I should probably say when. I think we need to be honest here, right? Which there's a very, very complicated ecosystem globally here. And one of the things that I consider us to bring to the table is well, firstly, an openness that things will go wrong somewhere at some point, but as and when they do go wrong, we know what to do, who to speak to, can act on things quickly. We'll provide notice as quickly as we physically can. There'll be no sort of on 2 days notice, your number's getting turned off, as far as we can manage it. So yeah, I would say open, honest, frequent communication of what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it, and I lost count of what I said here.
Yeah.
So I'd say communication's important. I think we obviously took an investment decision to build strategically for our business with Coolwave being our investment vehicle and a network vehicle globally. I think we've got a really good core team of engineers, commercial, reg, compliance working on this build.
Yeah.
So POPs are going in the right places. Licenses are going in all the time. I think we've got 10 in the hopper now with regulators. We're working with our suppliers to ensure that the porting and emergency services is working. We're testing all that. We're contractually looking at an agency contract. So in the event that there's a territory where sub-allocation is not allowed, Gamma will almost certainly not be a number range holder unless there's enough traffic volumes. So we'll effectively take numbers from a range holder, tier 1 range holder. We'll be the only sub-allocee allowed in that network chain. And then we will effectively contract with the end user. And we will do that with our partner being the agent representing the end user. So what that effectively means is Gamma will take on the KYC checks. We'll need our partners' help to do that. We don't have any particular interest in that end user. We're not out to sort of steal everyone's lunch or anything. But that partner will help us do the KYC, and then we'll also, because they have the relationship with the end user, they're able to wrap our charges into the end user's bill.
Yeah.
The key thing about that is we're really keen, and I think the way this will work is our partners are not able to mark up the services. I think fundamentally, if the partner's marking up the services, they are, for all intents and purposes, regardless of what our paperwork says, and we all agree is happening, reselling the service.
And visibly regulated, right? So that is the eyes of the regulator. Yeah, okay.
So effectively, our world would be a sort of tri-party order form, Gamma or Coolwave, partner, end customer, setting out who's doing what. And effectively, we are the voice enablement provider, trusted by that partner, acting as an agent of the outcomes.
And that's going to provide, we hope, a high level of certainty, because from a regulatory point of view, we're doing it exactly as needed, and we're being clear on roles and responsibilities. There's no ambiguity, and backing that up with a quality supply chain is going to give us what we need to provide that comfort level. You touched on a couple of points earlier that I think are really critical in this market. The first one is just expertise. And, I've been in this game 25 years. Gamma's been doing it 20. The team behind this and the team that we've put together is just full of that experience, because this is a horrifically complicated world and it's changing all the time. And, for me, when I look at it, that is the human element is, first of all, it's in our entire DNA as a company. Right? We've been working on client relationships. I've had them for 20 plus years with some partners, and, some of them we became friends over the years. I think coupling that with a deep level of expertise is really important here. They need to be able to pick up the phone and say, we've got a problem, help, and we can communicate openly and transparently. And I think that's getting lost a lot in the wholesale world today. The wholesale voice market, messaging markets became very transactional as prices have been driven to the floor. And a lot of that expertise is just missing out the market. We look at a bunch of our competitors and they're losing that expertise. And it's one of the things I'm really passionate about, is making sure that if we're going to do this, we need the best people at the front end, whether that be regulatory advice, technology, technical people, support people. Because I think that's the secret sauce here, is we'll do it with a human touch. It's it's in all of our values. We all want to do the right thing, but I think that point I really don't want to get lost on the audiences. That's critical from our perspective. And
I just come in there. I totally agree. It would be easy just to say that, but I think I would hope that anyone watching or listening to this understands the sort of long history of partnership we've had. But I think the other critical thing is, for Gamma in particular and Kuwait in particular, an issue affecting 10 users in Estonia on a Saturday morning actually is an issue which impacts the entire UK business.
Yeah.
Other geographies, there's an end customer on this which has a satellite office, which may or may not be important to another provider, but it's super important to us in the context of the relationship, the spend, the customer's overall quality of service and RAB that we're looking to provide.
To bring that to life, this is a real example we had maybe 9 months ago. We lost service to one of the largest hotels in the world because the supply chain wasn't rigorous enough, and it took 3 days to unpick. He couldn't take orders. It had a severe knock-on impact, and that was because we were dealing with a supply chain that was suboptimal, and that's critical here. If I could give people one bit of advice if they're looking to do this, is just understand the supply chain and make sure there's a whole lot of quality providers underneath it, and you've got access to as far down the chain as you can get. So look, I want to kind of sort of pivot this slightly and just talk about some of the interesting, challenging political landscapes right now, and how you see that impacting on this globalization piece. Because we've talked about France being problematic. We've got some interesting geopolitical issues going on globally right now with the US and others, and I think all of that ultimately flows through into regulators and governments and their thinking. What's your sort of perspective on how the geopolitical landscape is making telecoms have to rethink things?
Well, I think I said earlier that regulators in their domestic markets are becoming a bit more insular. There's nothing sort of malicious in that. I think it's just that they're seeking to gain controls of things they have within their sort of wheelhouse, and one of those is controlling their number stocks.
Yeah.
And, things within their gift. I think it's probably an element of their big sort of domestic tier one providers.
Yeah.
I suspect they're talking to them more than the global cloud.
Yeah.
So in one ear, I suspect they've got a sort of narrative which will probably support that sort of localization of supply, to be honest.
Yeah.
But again, it's just the nature of who they're speaking to.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you take Ofcom have always had the power to go after a problem actor providing a telephony service, regardless of whether or not they're a range hold.
Yeah.
But to my knowledge, they never have.
Yeah.
So geopolitically, there's just obviously a global effort, right, to try to reduce bad traffic.
Yeah.
I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but maybe we can post them with the podcast. The amount of scams that telecoms originated scams as a percentage of overall scams is actually not that high.
Right.
But the value of damage that it does financially and from a monetary basis, telecoms originated scams is way, way higher than the proportion of incidents. And that's because, as you can imagine, that you can just get so much more trust over the phone speaking to somebody, and therefore you end up being kind of more convinced. So that's sort of the world that we're all trying to act with. And of course, the knock-on impact of that is in theory a sort of loss of innovation, more sort of hoops to jump through, rightly or wrongly, and a domestic and regionalization of control and constraint, which will, I think, ultimately, if we're not all careful, start to impact upon the sort of globalization of software, cloud, and all the other stuff that you and I spend our lives talking about.
Yeah, and I think just kind of again your point on stifling innovation is a really interesting one, and this definitely has the propensity to do that. Yeah, but I think the kind of devil's advocate view that I buy into is there's a sort of there's being creative and innovative and disruptive, but doing it under the kind of guardrails of the relevant regulation, and doing it in conjunction with people buy telco. Telco's a hugely regulated market. But with that regulation, historically, it's kept certainty, robustness, scale, etc., etc. And then you've got the kind of innovation happening at the software layer. We definitely see, from a Gamma point of view, the room in the middle to be someone who's doing it with the robustness and reliability and scale and diligence of a telco's A, listed, and B, operating at scale, but being able to join fill the gap that exists in the market for someone who's technically very capable, but very risk conservative, and also being able to be innovative and operate at scale. And I think that's a big opportunity in the market for anyone that's prepared to do that, and certainly that's where we're putting our investment and focus. because that space exists right now.
It is easy to take a software product and roll it out globally with very little localization required. And actually, it's actually pretty easy to make a phone call work globally.
Technically, it's
easy. And in fact, you and I have had conversations with some of our engineers around this. Number presentation settings is a great example. Plug in a number, make it work. Well, actually, you can't do that, guys. You've got to constrain it. There's requirements here. And actually, I think what's happening now is there's an increasing amount of awareness and maybe fear, but certainly conscious awareness of what doing it right means in each territory. And I think one of the things that we can do to help these big hyperscalers, people with global ambitions, on a software basis, but perhaps not on a telephony basis, we can plug that gap, I think, and we can sort of take what we know and implant it into the solution as best we can.
Yeah, and we talk to many of the big software providers very, very regularly, where we strategically aligned to people like Microsoft and AWS, right? And we take those services to market. I think there's a reason that schemes like Operator Connect are doing really well, because it lets the telco do what the telco's good at, and it lets the software company do what the software company's good at. And I think that's why they're becoming more and more popular, is it's you stay in your lane, we'll stay in ours, and actually together, that's how we win in the market.
I agree.
But I think the sort of, the interesting market opportunity that we're definitely seeing is that sort of, way back in the day, if you wanted to have a cloud platform based in, I don't know, Germany, for example, but you then wanted to deliver a call to Japan, you just do traditional IDD and, long line the call with an international implementation of the world's IP space. And then the cloud platform, decided and made the smart techie changes to change the presentation number. Now they're having to actually land it much closer to territory, provide it locally as a call. So I think in one respect, it's definitely, going back to the geopolitical stuff, it's definitely meaning that when calls are delivered in country, they're being done properly, but it's causing a huge amount of grief and headache and thought having to be inputted in from the cloud platforms to deliver that in a way that end users expect, because they just want it to work, right? They want to, so you've got an employee in Germany and he wants to speak to his colleague in Japan, that just needs to work. And then similarly, if he's in a Japanese colleague wants to talk to another Japanese colleague, that again just needs to work. And they're having to operate very differently. So I think there's great opportunity in the market for service providers to really seize on that changing of the old guard into the new world. And I don't want that lost on people that it's probably one of the biggest opportunities out there for service providers to monetize this sort of ever changing, ever more complex environment by embracing people that do it properly.
Yeah, but of course, what of course this all means is the sort of the domestic and the sort of regionalization of compliance is effectively as barriers to entry in each geography.
Yeah,
and it's not just on telephony basis. There's lots of good reason for it. If you take sort of NIS2, tax compliance, all the other stuff, all the sort of making it so that you're not allowed to route calls into a geography from those numbers.
Yeah.
So I think the sort of the days of a hyperscaler going into a geography and saying, I'll deploy here and everyone can use it, I think increasingly looking like they're behind us. So what I think it ends up being is you end up having to sort of compartmentalize the bits of your solution, and you need to give those sort of chunks of the solution to parties that you trust.
Yeah.
And I think if we, and I'm sure there's lots of our competitors that are doing the same thing, but if we can provide that sort of voice slice on a trusted basis, then I think, that's where we win, and I think that's where our partners win, because we just sort of we each stick to their team.
Yeah, so I think we've covered quite a lot in this session. I think the sort of key takeaways for me are really that kind of doing it properly means, working with the local regulatory frameworks, the best of breed and country providers, doing it so that we can stand behind it and doing it to a level with great people at the front. That means that if and when it goes wrong, you've got the best people picking it, you've got the best people making the decisions on behalf of you. And actually, I think people take one thing away from it is if you want to work with a provider that is doing this and giving you that comfort in your business, I think we're a really safe pair of hands to do that. And we're doing this at scale globally and pushing out really aggressively. So I think that for me, those would be the key sort of takeaways. The market's getting more challenging, and working with a provider that A, does it properly, but B, understands the human value of it, both partnerships and then helping you to succeed in that ever more challenging landscape.
Yeah, I'd also probably say we're really open to just having I was going to say thought leadership type conversation. It's probably a thought-provoking conversation, much anything else. But having a conversation around, if a partner or their customer has a specific geography in mind, we can either tell them why we're not there because it's really hard, or what it might mean for us to get there and when. We're not sort of, our roadmap is as much driven by opportunity as around sort of strategic, sort of painting the world purple. So I would definitely say anyone who wants to speak to us about opportunities in any given territory, then do reach out, and we'll be honest with you about what we think about it and then how we can do it.
Well, look, Dave, that was super insightful. Yeah, as always, this is a kind of a topic that may appear dry at first, but actually the more you dig into it, I think it's critically important to successful service deployment and global communication enablement. Thanks everyone for listening. My name is Mike Mills, and look forward to speaking to you all soon.